Alright, what's going on, guys? We are back today with even more discoveries in the Elden Ring DLC, and people have been hard at work, picking apart literally every bit of it that we can. And with just how much is being found, it doesn't seem like the hunt is going to end anytime soon. So today, I'm going to share with you 8 new secrets that have been discovered in Elden Ring DLC, and you know how these videos go. If I show you something today that you didn't already know, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring, and lots of lore and discussion. So with all that, let's go ahead and jump right into the first one. In past videos, we've talked about the horn-sent grandam and the many different interactions you can have with her, such as talking to her while wearing the divine beast head, receiving scorpion soup as a gift, or even fighting her to trigger her defensive spells. But did you know that you can actually change the cutscene for the divine beast fight depending on how you interacted with her? Now if you go into this fight normally, this is what it should sound like.
O horn-decked beast from higher sphere delivered, take root inside the tower sculpted keepers, and perched within, we beg of thee, rise.
But given that the grandam is the narrator of this cutscene, if you go to her before activating the divine beast fight and deal a significant amount of damage until she falls over silent, then you will get an alternate version of this cutscene. So take a look.
O horn-decked beast from higher sphere delivered, we beg of thee to dance and kavoot. And with the beauty thy brightness lend away the foulness, fated thoughts, cleanse away the struggles, violent tragedy.
So as you can see, the dialogue is entirely different in this version, but the grandam is significantly quieter and sounds in pain. Now I'm not sure why you would ever want to do this and hurt the grandam, but it is something you can do to get this secret cutscene. So now you know. Metyr, Mother of the Fingers, is one of my favorite fights in the DLC. I think the spectacle here is awesome, and the lore is even better, but there's a part of this fight that you may not have paid close attention to that makes it even cooler, and that is the soundtrack. Now the first half of the soundtrack is great, it's epic, it's weird, and really evokes that alien feeling. But when you get to the second phase of the fight, the tone shifts entirely, going almost silent except for this heavy droning in the background. But this sound is very deliberate and tied very closely with Metyr and the lore going on here, because what this sound actually is the first recorded sound of a black hole. Now this is very fitting for Metyr, given that the connection between Metyr and the greater will is the microcosm, a little black hole of her own to receive the signals of the outer gods. And when we finally defeat her, she returns to that lightless void beyond. This is a super cool detail, and I love how FromSoftware always incorporates stuff like this, even in the places most people wouldn't look. And it really goes to show how much they care about their games. But now let's talk about a very useful gameplay tip for the DLC specifically. If you've explored the Scorpion River catacombs, then you've come across these death-blind eyes that afflict you just by looking at you. They can be really annoying to deal with, especially in context of the enemies in the area, and even sneaking past them can be a huge pain. But did you know there's actually a way to shut them down permanently, where you can just walk right in front of them and not get any death blight? Now, since these are supposed to be environmental factors, you should not be able to interact with them or hurt them if you attack them. However, if you hit them with something that does residual damage, such as Destined Death, then they will actually take the damage and the eyes will die. Now, their effect still shows up, but they will no longer do their intended purpose. It's a bit hard to explain, but it works. If you do this to the eyes that roam, then they will still continue their path until they get back to their origin, but then they'll shut off. Now, there may be an explanation for this. I think it's likely that these eyes are actually registered as creatures, but with a sort of protection on them as to not take damage. However, since Destined Death does a residual effect, it bypasses that shield and takes their health to 0, causing them to no longer function. But another example of this is with the Winter Lanterns, or the Aged Untouchables as they're known. They too can be affected by Destined Death. As you can see by the red effect on them, it will harm their health and bypass their shield that you normally can't interact with. But instead of having 1 health point, these guys have thousands. So you'll be sitting here all day trying to kill them this way. You're much better off just doing the parry method and killing them that way, which is a million times easier. But while we're on the topic of the Abyss, let's talk about some lore. While you're in this area, you'll be unable to summon your spectral steed, Torrent. Attempting to do so will give you the message, the spectral steed is frightened and cannot be summoned. Now when you see this, you'll probably think, well, why? Torrent hasn't had any problem being summoned so far, even when fighting gods. So why all of a sudden is he too scared to be summoned in this dark forest? Well, the answer lies here in this little item called the Surging Frenzied Flame, an object is set on the ground that spews out bits of frenzy. The description of this item reads, Spirit Gravestone burned by frenzied flame. Spirits are eternal, and yet frenzied flame melts them away regardless. No wonder the horn scent forbid the flame's use. So Torrent was never afraid before because he was never in any real danger. Not until we got to the Abyss, where the frenzied flame was so prevalent. Which causes us to ask a few questions about the frenzied flame ending. Firstly, why did Torrent stay with us even though we went on the path of becoming a Lord of Frenzied Flame? And if Torrent is truly dead in this scene, then what does that say about Melina, since she too is a spirit in a sense? In the last Discoveries video, we talked a bit about Rakshasa, specifically the way the armor worked. But today I want to revisit this character and dive into the namesake. In the game, Rakshasa is portrayed as a red knight with a big katana, and a bit of a mix between a knight and a samurai. But the lore describes Rakshasa as a person with a lust for carnage, with the red color resulting from the blood of her victims. But the name Rakshasa is not unique to Elden Ring. Rakshasas are a type of demon from Hindu mythology, often depicted as shape-shifting monsters who feasted on humans and drank their blood. Kind of like vampires in a way, as one of their prominent features are 2 fangs. So we can see where FromSoftware got the inspiration for the lore of this character, having this insatiable lust for blood, and even the sword doing bleed damage, and the armor causing a damage buff in general while taking more. Very cool stuff, and I love when little details like this cause you to go outside the game to learn more. Elden Ring DLC added a lot of new spells, and one that's really cool is Cherishing Fingers, a spell that surrounds the caster in a protective wall of fingers and also does damage in the process. But one other really cool thing that this spell does is deflect projectile magic, making it a great tool in the Radahn fight, as that includes most of her magic attacks. Now the timing is pretty hard to get down, I won't lie, but it is absolutely worth it if you do, because it will send her magic scattering as if you have a force field. Another fight that this is pretty useful in is Metyr, as it can deflect his frenzied flame. But I'm not gonna lie, I found his much trickier than Radahna's, and I'm not entirely sure why. But a spell from the base game with this same effect of deflecting spells is Rennala's Full Moon. And this spell has an absolutely perfect situational use against the final boss. If you ever find yourself struggling with Radahn's Meteor attack, Rennala's Twin Moon is the perfect counter, because it allows you to do this. Yes, you saw that correctly. Not only will Rennala's Full Moon destroy all of Radahn's meteorites, it will continue and deal a good chunk of damage to him. So you mage builds out there, absolutely have this spell in your tool bag and try other things outside the box, because you never know what little effect may play a huge role just like this. One of, if not the coolest areas in Elden Ring DLC is the Shaman Village, a place that tells visually the story of the tragedy of Marika's past. And we find 2 items here, one of which is the Golden Braid, an extremely useful talisman that massively negates holy damage, and it can be looted on a tree that has taken the form of a person. The description reads, a braid of golden hair cut loose. Queen Marika's offering to the grandmother. What was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There was no one left to answer, and Marika never returned home again. Now the lore there is fascinating, but there's one really cool detail that has been present ever since the game came out that alluded to this, and that is that every stake of Marika in the game is missing a braid. It's very apparent on the stakes, with the braid only on one side and no hair on the other, when compared to the intro cinematic of the game that depicts her after the shattering, with that braid cut off as well, but more hair on that side. And the question had been asked before, why was her braid cut off? And we really had no clues in the base game. But now we know, and I think that detail is pretty cool. I want to finish off this video by talking about a topic that I think many of you will have picked up on, but still remains a bit of an open discussion, and that is many of the similarities between Miquella and Ranni, not only in their story, but in their appearance and many lines of dialogue. Firstly, to discuss appearance, when we see Miquella in the second phase of the Radahn fight, he, like Ranni, is half physical, half spirit, and has 4 arms. Now the reason for this is of course like Ranni, Miquella discarded his flesh. We don't fully know the means by which he did that, but it was a major plot point that we uncovered throughout the DLC. Secondly, they have a very obvious overlap in their discussion of their new age.
I promise you, 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion.
1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon.
And thirdly, for their story, both are Empyreans that ended up ascending to become the gods of their age. Miquella's Age of Compassion and Ranni's Age of the Stars. But what I find so interesting is that their ways of governing the world are polar opposites. Miquella seeks to bewitch everyone, taking them under his ideals and guidance into a more compassionate world, or so he believes. While Ranni wants to free the world entirely from order, taking the Elden Ring far away. It's a very interesting dynamic, and it makes you wonder about the relationship between these 2 characters, because there are more than a few hints that they had contact, more so than just being half-siblings. So I just wanted to bring up these points right here, mainly to open the discussion with you guys in the comments of just what do you think about it. It's very interesting, and probably something we'll be pondering for a while. Anyways though guys, that is going to do it for the video today. I hope I showed you something that you didn't already know, and if I did, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new around here. If you have discoveries that we haven't covered already, be sure to leave those in the comments, and I'll likely feature them in future videos. But as always, I will catch you in the next one.